I can't stop thinking about the movie Fountain of Youth. And here's the thing. I've never even seen it. In case you're not aware, Fountain of Youth is a movie released last year by Apple Films. It's directed by Guy Ritchie, as in the guy who made Snatch, Sherlock Holmes, the live-action Aladdin, and The Gentleman. It stars Natalie Portman and John Krasinski. It is an Indiana Jones-style globe-trotting adventure movie. It cost $180 million, and it might as well not exist. Last week, I was talking to my good friend Siddhant Adlaka, a full-time professional film critic, member of the New York Film Critics Circle, who watches over 300 new movies a year. And when I brought up Fountain of Youth, he had never even heard of it.
Are you familiar with the movie Fountain of Youth?
Dude, I'm planning a wedding reception right now. The Fountain of what?
Youth. It's an Apple Films release. Cost like $180 million. Came out last year.
Are you making this up? Because I don't have time for this, all right?
And it's not just him. I bet some of you watching this right now have also never heard of this movie. Since Apple never released the film in theaters, there are no box office numbers to tell us how many people actually watched it. So we have to look for evidence in other places. On Letterboxd, Fountain of Youth has only been logged 108,000 times. To put this in perspective, Wolfman, a movie from last year considered a flop that only made $35 million at the box office, has been logged more than twice as many times. Or compare it to other streaming movies. Coda, another Apple Films release, has been logged 554,000 times. This year's The Rip has been logged 366,000. And Carry On, the mid-budget thriller set at an airport, has been logged 1.2 million times. On IMDb, Fountain of Youth has 52,000 ratings. Remember, this is a big-budget blockbuster. In comparison, on IMDb, Materialists, the A24 romantic dramedy, has 97,000 ratings. Movies like this are considered tentpole movies by studios. They're movies designed to reach a huge audience, make a lot of money, and keep the company profitable. But here, it's not like the movie flopped. It's that Apple didn't even seem to try to make people aware of it. According to various streaming charts that report hours watched, in its first week of release, Fountain of Youth was beaten by Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, a movie released 2 years earlier. And Fountain of Youth is far from the only example of this phenomenon. For nearly a decade, the major streamers like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple have released dozens of would-be blockbusters. Movies like Red Notice, The Tomorrow War, Heart of Stone, Lift, Back in Action, or The Electric State. And what drives me nuts is that the streamers are ostensibly doing the very thing we're always saying we want Hollywood to do. They are making big-budget movies based on original ideas, not just remakes and sequels and adaptations of video games and comic books. And yet, they seem to be capable of only making bad ones, every single time. The Rotten Tomatoes scores for these movies are consistently in the 20 to 50% range. These are movies that make no impact, that have no fandoms. They have sequels announced that never materialize. It's almost as if they are designed to be as forgettable as possible. So, why? What exactly is going on behind the scenes? How can they possibly be so bad at this? Well, here's the thing. Like I'm willing to bet most of you watching this, I haven't actually seen most of these movies. I watched Red Notice and The Gray Man a couple years ago as research for videos, and I had a terrible time. So surely, I don't hate myself enough to watch all the rest, right? Right? Hey guys, so I have locked myself inside my apartment, and I've set up cameras here, and here, and here, and over the next 48 hours, I am going to watch all 20 or so of these streaming blockbusters. I saw that video where Mr. Beast buried himself alive for like a week, and I feel like this is an equivalently horrible thing to do to yourself, so I'm hoping this gets like at least 100 million views. But more importantly than that, I am praying that I find some answers about what is up with these movies and why they exist, because if I don't, then this is going to be the worst weekend of my life. So I canceled all my weekend plans, sorry Siddhant for missing your wedding, and I watched 20 streaming blockbusters. Red Notice, The Tomorrow War, Argyle, Lift, Slumberland, Rebel Moon Part 1, Rebel Moon Part 2. Okay, update. I'm 10 hours in, and this is even harder than I thought it would be. I just finished watching Atlas, the movie starring Jennifer Lopez, where she pilots a giant mech suit. And you probably think I'm making that up, which is fair. I checked online, and not a single person I follow on Letterboxd has logged this movie. But it is, in fact, real, and I have watched it, and it is not good. In 2015, Netflix released its first original movie, Cary Fukunaga's war drama, Beasts of No Nation. And from there, they quickly ramped up their movie production. But still, their main cinematic offering was their library of films licensed from other studios. In 2016, Netflix proudly announced a deal to be the exclusive streaming home to all the latest films from Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Pixar, the biggest blockbusters around. But then, 1 year later, Disney abruptly pulled out of the agreement and took these movies off of Netflix, reserving them for the launch of Disney Plus 2 years later. Netflix had already been moving forward on its first big-budget blockbuster, the fantasy cop drama Bright. You know, the movie where Will Smith says fairy lives don't matter and has Joe Rogan interviewing an orc. Oh, Bright. So Bright turned out to be their Pandora's box. Soon they doubled down and started aggressively developing blockbusters of their own to fill this Disney-sized hole. Now look, it's easy to dunk on streaming movies, and we're gonna do it a lot in this episode. But here's the thing, sometimes they're good. Last year, Netflix had 2 Best Picture nominees, Train Dreams and Frankenstein. They've released all of Noah Baumbach and David Fincher's projects for the past decade. Martin Scorsese's last 2 movies, which are both incredible, were produced by streamers, one Netflix, one Apple. Streamers have given us The Power of the Dog, Roma, Coda, Okja, the Knives Out sequels, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, The Tragedy of Macbeth, Da 5 Bloods. The streamers can absolutely make good movies. They've done it for years, they will continue to do it. We have plenty of evidence of that. But there is just one kind of movie that they can't seem to figure out. The blockbuster. Now, for the purposes of this conversation, we need to be clear about how we are defining blockbuster. So, to qualify for what we're talking about in this episode, a movie needs to have a budget of $100 million or more, A-list stars and/or director, and has to be an action-adventure movie aimed at a wide audience. In other words, a would-be classic summer blockbuster. Movies that cost a lot of money and are designed to make a lot of money. The idea of blockbusters is that they're high risk, high reward. Or in the case of sequels or franchise movies, low risk, high reward. Yeah, you spend a ton of money on a James Cameron movie, but then you probably make billions of dollars more. But since the streamers don't actually release these movies in theaters, outside of the extremely rare cases like Argyle, hey, remember Argyle? They have no way of actually making money. Spending $100 million on a Martin Scorsese movie at least gets you a bunch of Oscar nominations and brings prestige to your overall brand. But what prestige are you getting from Fountain of Youth? How is this not just the equivalent of lighting $180 million on fire? If you watch this channel regularly, you know that I don't usually do videos about bad movies. I realize that negativity usually performs better on YouTube. Like, there are so many channels that are almost exclusively about shitty movies, with thumbnails saying why it sucks, and titles about how movies ruin a franchise, or are epic failures, or are absolute garbage, and that's fine. I'm not gonna tell people what to make, and sometimes a big takedown video can be really fun and satisfying. But personally, if I'm going to spend weeks of my life on a topic, I usually don't want it to be something that I hate, that makes me angry. I only do that in rare, special cases. If I'm going to submerge myself into cinematic sewage for nearly a month, it had better be for a really good reason. And I hope this is one. Early in day 2, my mind and body started breaking down. I'd lost all sense of good or bad, up or down, right or wrong, and I still hadn't even gotten to the electric state. But the end was in sight, and soon this would all be over. So, I did it. I watched all of these movies, and I know, right now, you are all dying to know, how were they? Were any of them any good? No. No, they weren't. They're bad. Like, the average quality level is pretty low. I didn't like them. And they're not fun bad. Like, these are not laughably inept movies. These are not movies that you watch with your friends and make fun of. They are generally competently put together. They look like movies you might see in a theater. They often have very good visual effects that clearly cost a lot of money. They have talented actors in them. You know, look at these people here. And yet, they are all bad. But they're not all the same kind of bad. Bright and The Electric State are both massive miscalculations, like they're total disasters. They're each attempting to create an expansive world and mythology with a ton of world building. Famously, in 2015, Bright screenwriter Max Landis, who, lest we forget, has a whole section of his Wikipedia page dedicated to sexual assault allegations, tweeted that the movie could potentially be his Star Wars. It's not, but I see how he got that idea. These movies have the ambition to create something exciting and new, but unfortunately, the world building is all convoluted and derivative. 5 minutes into The Electric State, when they're telling me that Mr. Peanut delivered a fiery robot rights speech that kicked off a war, I'm wondering, when did we skip over the part when the robots gained sentience and emotion? Because a few seconds ago, they were portrayed as simple automatons. Bright tries to graft classic fantasy archetypes onto a story about modern society and racial prejudice, where Will Smith learns to stop being racist against orcs. There is so much time in these movies spent on world building that is confusing and stupid instead of being exciting and intriguing, and that's just the foundation of the movie. On top of that, we get thinly written characters and stories that are both convoluted and very boring. Look, I love stories about robot wars. I literally just rewatched The Animatrix a few days ago. A fantasy crime movie sounds cool. I want to like these, but they are both just miserable experiences to sit through. They cost so much money, and neither of them even have a single good action scene. Similarly, Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder's 2-part blank check passion project, is clearly just Star Wars mashed up with Seven Samurai, with the serial numbers filed off. And again, I think that sounds pretty fun. Snyder is creating an entire galaxy full of truly cool-looking stuff that could potentially support a lengthy interconnected franchise if it wasn't such a lifeless slog. Across a truly punishing number of hours of film, there is almost no narrative momentum or a character with any personality. Part 1 spends an hour on a getting the team together montage, and I still don't really know what anyone's deal is. This is a story that definitely needed a lot of notes to get it ready to film, but Snyder was given full creative control, and no one told him, hey bud, maybe this one isn't ready to go quite yet. And for all of you wondering, I watched the shorter cuts, not the director's cuts, because life is simply too short to spend 6.5 hours watching Rebel Moon. I'm sure plenty of Zack's biggest fans will tell me in the comments that I don't really understand these movies unless I get the extra 2 hours of material, but I don't care. Now, I will say, while not really being good, Slumberland is better made than a lot of these. Francis Lawrence is a very solid director. Joe Willems, shout out to another Willems, is a really good cinematographer, so the movie actually looks good, looks like a real movie, and it starts out feeling like a solid 80s kids fantasy movie, like Time Bandits or something. But as it goes on, it just ends up having too thin a script executed with a visual effects overload, and it eventually grows tiring. But those ones, the more auteurist streaming blockbusters, are anomalies. The rest of them mostly fall into a category that I'm calling fake movies. Like, they resemble fictional movies within other movies. You know in Notting Hill, that sci-fi movie that Julia Roberts' character stars in? That's what these feel like.
I liked the bit in space.
The genre that every streamer is obsessed with, that so many of these movies fall into, is action comedy. And some of my favorite movies ever are action comedies. The Nice Guys, Jackie Chan movies. But here, action comedy really translates to movies starring a duo who quip at each other while they travel to various European cities, and also they both have guns. The action looks expensive, but never actually gets exciting, and the comedy never elicits more than a smile. At best, you're doing one of those sad nose breath ones.
Well, here's my counteroffer. You're under arrest.
Oh my God, read the room.
Several of these movies, like Fountain of Youth, Red Notice, and Lift, are about renowned international thieves. Fountain of Youth and Red Notice actually have almost identical scenes early on, in which the thief, John Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds respectively, looking extremely similar, steals something from a museum and then escapes into a sports car. And if they're not about thieves, they're about spies. Truly, there are so many movies about spies. Even if a movie is a romantic comedy, it's about spies. These movies are almost all aiming for a breezy Ocean's 11 vibe, with cool professionals doing cool stuff in cool places around the world. But what we end up with are Teflon movies, with no stakes or emotion or conflict. No one seems to struggle, and everyone is always rich. They are constantly traveling on private planes and staying in luxury hotels. No one is a regular person. Lift, the Netflix heist movie directed by F. Gary Gray and starring Kevin Hart, might truly be the most lifeless, insulting nothing burger of a movie I have ever seen. It is a movie where Kevin Hart, who is famously a comedian, plays a cool Danny Ocean-type master thief who we are told by freeze-frame text is the boss. And at no point in the movie does he make any jokes or do anything funny. He and his heist team party on their private yacht, proudly steal and resell NFTs, and spend most of the movie standing in either an aircraft hangar or a penthouse apartment surrounded by green screens. It's lit like a soap opera, it feels like it was written by AI, and it cost $100 million. I would rather go to the dentist than watch this again. Like, you guys know that I hate this word, but sometimes it is the only one to use. This is content. Content hats available in our merch store. Now, it's totally fine to wear your influences on your sleeve, but if you're going to imitate something, at least understand what worked about it in the first place. Like, it's cool to be influenced by the Soderbergh Oceans movies. They are some of my favorite movies ever. But those movies are genuinely very funny. They have a beautiful, distinctive visual style, And there are very real personal emotional stakes. The only elements these movies seemed to retain is fast-paced, luxurious, thieves, and minimal conflict. So anyway, after a year of thinking about it, I have now finally seen Fountain of Youth. And while I cannot confirm that it is not a psyop, I promise you, it is a real thing that will take about 2 hours to watch on Apple TV. Although I would not recommend it. Fountain of Youth is a globe-trotting adventure involving archaeology and ancient clues and temples and treasures, so obviously the main inspiration here is the Indiana Jones movies. And I love the Indiana Jones movies. But let me list some facts about the Indiana Jones movies. In those movies, Indy has constant setbacks. Belloc keeps stealing everything he finds. Indy gets hurt constantly, like he really gets the shit beaten out of him. When he thinks Marion is dead, he gets depressed. And the whole time, the stakes are that he's trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, or the Holy Grail, so that they don't fall into the hands of the Nazis, which would allow them to potentially achieve unstoppable world-conquering supernatural power. Pretty big stakes. Okay, so now in Fountain of Youth, John Krasinski and Natalie Portman are searching for the titular fountain just because it's just like a thing they're interested in. And if they don't find it, the stakes are that they'll be mildly disappointed. The biggest obstacle is that sometimes Eiza Gonzalez shows up to stop them, and she has a flirty fight with Krasinski, and every time he gets away with no setbacks. No one really gets hurt, no one dies, the conflict never rises above bickering. The characters also have a lot of money, so they're always traveling luxuriously with massive resources at their disposal. They never get dirty or struggle all that much. This is National Treasure on Downers. Oh, and just a reminder, it cost $180 million. These movies are vapor. They resemble other movies that we like, they have enough production value and enough famous actors to look legit, and they all amount to nothing. They evaporate from memory 24 hours after watching. No one is ever going to say that any of these movies is their favorite movie ever. And I don't know, I think that making movies that you don't expect anyone to care about or fall in love with just feels kinda shitty. One thing I'll say for Zack Snyder, at least he's putting his heart into Rebel Moon. The rest of these, I imagine everyone involved has already forgotten they ever made. Oh, and also, this is far from these movies' worst offenses, but I have to bring it up. As a direct attack on me personally, both Fountain of Youth and The Electric State end with Oasis songs. This is a desperate, transparent attempt to make me like your movies, and it did not work. So why are these movies like this? Why does this keep happening again and again and again? Well, I did some digging, I spoke to some sources, and I attempted the closest that I ever get to real journalism. And in the process, I discovered a few reasons. And I also put together some crazy theories, which is not real journalism, but whatever. This is my channel, and no editor is going to stop me from publishing it. Let's go. Reason number one. Reading about the development histories of all these movies, one thing that keeps coming up is that a surprising number of them had actually been developed at different studios, then at some point in the process sold to a streamer. The first step toward this was the Cloverfield paradox in 2018. Like the two preceding Cloverfield films, it was fully produced at Paramount, but when it was complete, Paramount reportedly, quote, doubted its commercial viability. In other words, they thought the movie was bad and that people wouldn't like it and that it would flop. And so, they sold it to Netflix for $50 million. Paramount made all their money back, and Netflix had a big, shiny thing to advertise. Everyone wins. Netflix generated a ton of excitement when they dropped a trailer for it during the Super Bowl that announced the movie would be streaming as soon as the game ended, which is a pretty cool move. But then, people watched the movie and were like, never mind, this sucks. And this kind of thing kept happening. The Tomorrow War was also produced as a Paramount movie, and after it was finished, they sold it to Amazon for $200 million to be released on Prime Video. Universal won a bidding war for Red Notice, but when they received the screenplay, they, according to Forbes, seemed hesitant, probably because the script sucks. And so Netflix gladly took on the project. The same thing happened with The Electric State. Universal had the project, started to grow concerned as it was developing, and once again, Netflix swooped in to take it. The traditional studios can obviously be very hit or miss with their projects, but at least they usually have a solid sense of when they've got a real stinker on their hands. But the streamers are only too happy to take those stinkers, as long as they have an A-list movie star whose face they can put in the little tile on the platform. Because they're not concerned about opening weekend box office or cinema score, or if the movie will have legs and make its budget back. I even wonder how much it matters if people actually watch these movies. Maybe the only thing that matters is the appearance of having original big-budget blockbusters. It makes them look legit while people scroll past them all to watch season 97 of Love is Blind. The traditional studios have to sell each movie to the public as its own individual product. But for streamers, who cares if you don't watch Rebel Moon? You're still paying for Netflix every month. You get the feeling of being offered new things when really, you're just there to rewatch Mad Men. Reason number 2. Beyond the movies that were pawned off by embarrassed studios, how do the streamers choose what movies they develop themselves? Simple. By studying lots and lots of data on viewer activity. I talked to my friend Drew Taylor, senior film reporter at The Wrap, who's been looking into this stuff for years, and here's what he told me.
They actually generate data in terms of what is hitting on Netflix or other streamers and send those out to agencies so that the agents can then collect product that is fitting what the data is showing viewers want. So one of the things that they recently put out is something called proficiency porn, which is like a guy or gal who's really good at something tackling some big, adventure. So that could be a thief. It could be a soldier, like in War Machine. So that's what they really like. In the Blockbuster space, they're looking for what they call gourmet hamburgers. So it's, you know what you're getting. You've had it before, but there's a level of sheen and sort of like professionalism that sets it apart from something else.
And once you hear this, things suddenly start to click into place. All these movies about thieves and spies, they're about people who are good at stuff. Proficiency porn. I mentioned earlier that so many of them seem to have an Ocean's 11 type tone, but I think the influence might go even deeper than that. Heads up, this is one of the crazy theories I promised, but I think it's a solid one. So Ocean's 11 has been an almost constant presence on Netflix for the past decade, meaning they continue to pay Warner Brothers to license it, which would mean they have lots of data saying that people watch it and rewatch it a ton, which makes sense. It is the most rewatchable movie in the world. And in Ocean's 11, we can see all the hallmarks of modern streaming movies. We have characters who are hyper-proficient at their jobs. Luxury. Light and fun and comforting. A-list movie stars being funny. A familiar genre that launched a franchise. And so, with their obsession with data, and them having data saying viewers consistently rewatch Ocean's 11, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that executives went to agencies saying, hey, please give us stuff about fancy thieves with an Ocean's-type vibe. A few years ago, Dexter Fletcher gave a really interesting interview while promoting the Apple Films release Ghosted, which he directed. He said, "You can't make a film for streaming the same way you do for theatrical. There are different metrics and approaches. There has to be, for the very reason that people can turn off very quickly. Fletcher had an idea for a stylish opening sequence, an homage to the 1978 film Foul Play, but Apple executives rejected the idea. They said you can't do it because if the opening sequence goes on and something doesn't happen in the first 30 seconds, we know the data shows that people will just turn off. And knowing about their approach to making movies, suddenly you start noticing things like this everywhere. Like how many of these movies open with a drone shot over a city in a foreign country while an expensive needle drop plays. Here's one in Fountain of Youth, our Red Notice, our Lift, our Back in Action, and Heart of Stone. And sometimes, during this drone shot, the main character is on a phone call and explains their whole backstory in an off-screen voiceover, like in the Tomorrow War.
Look, I'm incredibly proud of my career in the military, and I did 2 combat tours, but...
And the ultimate insult, the Melania movie opens the same way. And if this idea of moving fast so viewers don't turn it off applies to the opening, why not the whole movie? In every one of these, there is never a moment where the plot slows down and it breathes for a moment. There's also never a moment where the movie gets sad or dark or intense. There's nothing weird or unexpected in these movies. They're constructed to never have a moment where the audience could potentially turn it off. It's like the Mr. Beast approach to YouTube applied to movies. But at least his videos sometimes, or one time, have cool guys winning a GameStop. None of these have that. Remember, the streamers are tech companies, and to put it in tech speak, they are creating products with zero friction. They go down easily, and they just slide off you. And while we're talking about data, here's another fun example. According to sources I spoke to, the family plan was a big success for Apple, and according to their data, viewers of the first movie also watched movies set in Europe. So, when they greenlit a sequel, their one major note was, it has to take place in Europe. Not to get all pretentious here, but this is an insane way to make art. If all you're aiming for is stuff that people will half watch, shrug, and say, oh, it was fine, I guess, then sure, keep doing it. But you're never going to make anything that means something to people this way. This method of constructing movies based on consumer data just makes me think of this great interview with Noel Gallagher.
The consumer didn't want Jimi Hendrix, but they got him. And it changed the world. And the consumer didn't want Sgt. Pepper's, but they got it. And they didn't want the Sex Pistols, but they got it. Fuck the customer. The customer doesn't know what he wants. You fucking give it to him, and he likes it.
Okay, reason number 3, we have to talk about David Ellison. He's been in the news a lot this past year. In case you don't know, the short version is that he is the son of Larry Ellison, one of the richest people alive. Larry funded David's dreams of being an actor, and when those didn't work out,
how the hell could this have happened? I don't know. You don't know.
He funded David's secondary dreams of being a movie producer.
You said it yourself. We're making it happen.
So with his dad's money, David founded Skydance, which started co-financing movies with an exclusive deal with Paramount Pictures. Then they started moving beyond just financing and getting more involved in developing and producing projects themselves. In 2019, they started working a lot with streaming companies, producing movies like Six Underground, The Tomorrow War, Ghosted, The Family Plan, and, you guessed it, Fountain of Youth. Then last year, Skydance bought Paramount Pictures, and right now, they are attempting to also buy Warner Brothers and merge the two studios. So, what does this have to do with anything? Well, as we established earlier, The Tomorrow War was developed as a Paramount movie and then sold to Amazon. So why, when they had this partnership with Paramount for over a decade, did they start producing these movies for other platforms? Well, to answer that question, it's time for another crazy theory. Looking at these movies, my simple guess is that Paramount thought they seemed bad. I mean, they generally are bad. Like, Ghosted is one of the worst pieces of shit I've watched in years. So I think Paramount probably correctly believed these would not be successful in theaters and said, No thanks. And so Skydance went to the streamers, who were all too eager to grab whatever they could get that vaguely resembled a real movie. In 2022, Skydance moved their deal from Paramount to Apple, promising to produce 2 films a year, each budgeted at least $125 million. And now, Skydance owns Paramount, which I think sucks, but the current presidential administration are big fans of. So, make of that what you will. Even putting aside how bad it is to have this billionaire buying up studios while cozying up to some of the worst people alive, David Ellison has bad taste in movies. Most of the projects Skydance develops are bad. So buckle up, kids, because I think Paramount is going to start releasing a lot more slop than before. Okay, so now we move on to our 4th and final reason. As I watched all these movies, I started to realize that so many of their problems, the generic, bland, samey feeling of all of them, stems from one core issue. They all cost way too much money.
It just adds up. They're so concerned about mitigating risk that they just end up paying so much for each of these movies. And I think that's really what it is, that the money is kind of like the bubble wrap around these things that are kind of trying to make it as easy and frictionless as possible in terms of their direct-to-consumer delivery.
Okay, a few of these, like Rebel Moon, make sense. That's a big space opera. It needs a big budget. But so many of these movies on paper are mid-budget movies. Movies that, in the 90s, would be B-tier releases, but they're unnecessarily pumped up to blockbuster levels. The Tomorrow War, about people from the present being drafted into a war 30 years in the future to fight an alien invasion, should be something on the level of an 80s John Carpenter movie. And it's most engaging when it's following a small group of people stuck in a building dealing with one alien monster. But then most of the rest of the movie is just endless CGI hordes of aliens in CGI locations, and it gets really tiresome. The Gray Man should be a fun, exciting, tactile spy thriller like the Bourne movies or The Man from U.N.C.L.E., a movie that cost $75 million. But instead, this cost more than double that and is full of dull, sludgy CGI action set pieces. As I mentioned before, Slumberland feels like a mid-budget 80s fantasy movie, but as it goes on, it just turns into actors standing on green screens in every scene, surrounded by endless, expensive CGI. Back in Action is an action comedy about some retired spies trying to be suburban parents. So why does it need to have massive plane crash action set pieces straight out of a James Bond movie? And this isn't even really unique to streaming. It happens to theatrically released studio blockbusters as well. A recurring problem with Marvel movies is the insistence that every one needs to be a giant $200 million spectacle. I would argue that both Shang-Chi and Black Widow would be much better movies if their budgets were half the size, because the more they get pumped full of bland CGI-filled set pieces, the worse they get. This all seems to stem from this idea that the movies have to look big enough to get audiences to care about them. They need the spectacle of a huge Hollywood blockbuster. But it just makes the movies feel like the same thing over and over. Back in Action, a movie that I would not actually consider good, is still one of the better ones I watched for this. But the enjoyable parts are all when it leans more on Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx's chemistry and lets them be charming, funny movie stars. When it flips the switch and tries to be a blockbuster action movie, that is when I pick up my phone and start scrolling Instagram. It's like how for years Netflix demanded that all of their movies be shot in 4K or higher, refusing to allow the Arri Alexa, many cinematographers' preferred camera, because the resolution is just under 4K. So they were sacrificing quality and artistry in service of some vague notion of promising the audience more resolution, as if a bigger pixel count is actually what anyone cares about. But there's another reason for these absurd budgets. Like, how does something as nondescript and bland as Fountain of Youth cost $180 million? How does The Electric State cost an absolutely criminal $320 million? Like, yeah, there are a lot of CGI characters, but this is not Avatar we're talking about. Most of this movie is Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown walking around a desert. Well, one of the main reasons they're so costly is due to the movie stars' salaries. Here's a 2019 article in Variety explaining the traditional theatrically released studio model for actor salaries compared to streaming. For most projects, actors' contracts stipulate that they will receive a percentage of the profits. In rare cases, a movie star will get what is called first dollar gross, which is a portion of the studio revenues before a picture is in the black. Because Netflix movies do not have wide theatrical distribution, and the company receives most of its revenues from subscriptions, not from home entertainment sales and licensing, a similar form of profit sharing isn't feasible. Netflix's salaries tend to be larger as a reflection of that reality. So streamers like Netflix will pay stars up to several times their usual salaries, a staggering amount of money. So even if the project sucks, even if it's not going to theaters and will barely get seen or cared about, hey, here's enough money to buy a private island. Recently, I was talking to friend of the channel, Ben David Grabinski, the writer-director of the recent Hulu original movie, Mike and Nick and Nick and Alice, and he told me a fun story about some 1980s film history. Canon Films wanted to hire Sylvester Stallone for the lead of Over the Top. He passed. He felt like working for Golan Globus was slumming it. They then offered him the biggest salary in movie history to reconsider. Stallone promptly accepted the role. After that, the major studios had to match Stallone's new quote. That adjusted the entire ecosystem of movie star salaries. Why am I bringing this up right now? No reason. It's not comparable to anything you're discussing. So if you ever wonder why it seems like some stars are making a ton of movies for streaming, like Mark Wahlberg has made 8 streaming movies in the past 6 years, or Adam Sandler has been in 15 Netflix movies in the past decade, it's because they are being paid an ungodly amount of money. As much as streaming is just a way of life now, a thing we've all accepted that is here to stay, one thing to remember is that if movies are not playing in theaters, then these are still, in a sense, made-for-TV movies, which for decades always carried with them a stigma.
90210's Tori Spelling. Mother, may I speak with danger? NBC Monday.
And that stigma still hasn't totally gone away. Like, Tom Cruise is never going to do a streaming movie, and he refused to allow Paramount to put Top Gun Maverick on streaming during the pandemic.
Back in a movie theater, everybody.
Leo only ever made one streaming movie, and that was only because it was the middle of the pandemic and we weren't sure if movie theaters would ever reopen. He's never gonna do it again. Because similar to how Disney killed the value of Marvel and Pixar and Star Wars by putting all this new stuff on Disney+, movie stars know that if they do too many streaming movies, they lose something special. They're no longer a rare commodity that you have to go to the theater for. Now, they're just on TV. And so the only way to sweeten the deal for big actors is that the streamers are often still resorting to the same Golan Globus tactics from 40 years ago. Dump money on them the same way Harrison Ford killed that guy with corn in Witness. Which again, seems insane for movies that they refuse to release in theaters. So they can't even make that money back. But look, streamers and theatrical releases, that's its own conversation. So many times over the last 10 years, the streamers have made these huge movies intended to launch franchises. Bright had a sequel announced, and they did produce one anime spin-off movie. Red Notice had 2 sequels announced. The Gray Man had both a sequel and a spin-off announced, with Scott Stuber, chairman of Netflix Films, saying, "We're excited to build out the Gray Man universe." Argylle was announced as the first film in an intended trilogy. A sequel to The Tomorrow War was announced as being in development in 2021. Rebel Moon was intended to be a 5 or 6 film saga. Netflix's 2019 Michael Bay film Six Underground had sequels announced at the time of its release, but a couple years later, Stuber pulled the plug, saying, "We didn't feel like we got there creatively." In the same interview, he gave an incredible quote. "We have to be more consistent at making these movies more culturally relevant and putting them in the zeitgeist. We know the audience is there for these movies, but I want people to feel that impact in their conversations with friends and colleagues. We've done it, but we haven't done it consistently." And yeah, I agree, they should be better about that. This is the kind of thinking that we want to see. But also, he gave that interview in 2021, and then these are the movies that he made. Six Underground is actually better than most of these. Scott, seriously, what are you doing? Every time Netflix has made a concerted effort to capture the zeitgeist, to launch a popular franchise that will continue for years, they have failed. And yet, all of their breakout movies, the ones that actually turn out to be hits and actually get sequels made, are the unexpected mid-budget movies, like Extraction or Enola Holmes, both of which have multiple installments, or Carry On, the 90s throwback mid-budget thriller, which is their third most watched movie ever. And of course, there is K-pop Demon Hunters, a movie that they bought from Sony and released with little fanfare last summer that became an Oscar-winning phenomenon. It is the biggest movie in Netflix history, so popular in fact that they were forced to put it in theaters to meet the demand. Again, they can make good movies and they can make popular movies. It's just never the ones they're expecting. Okay, look, I know a lot of you have been screaming at your TVs and laptops and phones for the last 40 minutes or so about the one major example that I have been forgetting. Dozens of you have probably already left comments about this before you finished the video. And if you do that, why? It just makes you look silly. So yes, there is one streaming blockbuster that is not just, according to Patrick Willems, very good, but it was also a massive box office success and was nominated for Best Picture at this year's Academy Awards. I'm talking, of course, about F1. Directed by Joseph Kosinski, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, and starring Brad Pitt. F1 was distributed by Warner Brothers, thus the theatrical release, but it was produced by Apple Films, and it was one of the biggest movies of last summer. So, how did this happen? If Apple can make this, why are they making Fountain of Youth? Now that is a great question, and what I think it mostly comes down to is that this was really made outside of the streaming ecosystem. It was largely the same team behind Top Gun Maverick, which was a success so enormous that they don't need to take any notes from Apple about what the data is saying people want. Bruckheimer is an old-school producer who's been making massive blockbusters since the early 80s. And here, they also had Brad Pitt's production company, Plan B, developing the movie. And Plan B, if you look at it, has a pretty good track record. Cinema is not a science. It's not math. And you can't figure it out with data. You can't get an algorithm to make a good movie. This is art. It's storytelling. And a lot of this simply comes down to taste, combined, of course, with some business strategy. Like, why did Warner Brothers rock everyone's shit last year, producing a string of exciting, successful movies with several original blockbusters that culminated in a Best Picture win? Because Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy, the heads of Warner Brothers Pictures, have good taste. Why does Skydance produce so many derivative slop blockbusters? Because David Ellison has bad taste.
I know!
Netflix keeps trying to choose blockbusters that check a lot of boxes that say they'll be successful, not movies that actually seem exciting and good. And so they end up with garbage over and over again, which is really depressing. And on that note, after binging all of these awful movies and talking about them all day, I need to go get some air. So, I told you up at the top, I don't usually like to spend this much time talking about bad movies and dwelling on negativity. So now, I think it's important to ask ourselves, can things actually change? Well, Scott Stuber was the chairman of Netflix Film from 2017 until 2024, overseeing this entire era of massively expensive, consistently bad movies.
None of us will be remembered.
But he recently stepped down from the position, replaced by Dan Lin. And as referenced multiple times throughout a 2024 New York Times article, Lin was in charge of a company-wide mandate to improve the quality of their films. If nothing else, they're aware that there was a problem. And so far, looking at 2026, they've made some changes. Netflix has had 0 mega-budget blockbusters this year, instead focusing on more mid-budget action thrillers aimed at adults, like The Rip, War Machine, and Apex, all of which were generally well-received. And for the rest of the year, Netflix's major releases look shockingly promising. There's, of course, David Fincher's The Adventures of Cliff Booth, the sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, written by Quentin Tarantino and again starring Brad Pitt, which I'm gonna bet now will probably rock. There is Ben Affleck's crime thriller Animals, Fernando Meirelles' heist film Here Comes the Flood with Denzel Washington and Robert Pattinson, and Brad Bird's animated sci-fi noir Ray Gun. And of course, their biggest upcoming release, Greta Gerwig's Narnia movie, which just got pushed back to early 2027. Gerwig obviously has an incredible track record. She's one of the most exciting people working in mainstream film right now, and she did what had seemed impossible for so many years. She convinced Netflix to give the film a wide IMAX theatrical release. Look, I know it's early and we haven't seen much from these upcoming movies, but nowhere here do I see anything like The Gray Man, and I definitely don't see any of those promised Red Notice sequels, thank God. And look, this isn't even real evidence, but at CinemaCon in April, Ted Sarandos, Netflix co-chief executive, attended for the very first time, and he held meetings with the heads of movie theater chains. So I'm hesitant to get my hopes up, but there's a chance that Netflix's policy against theatrical releases could change. So if I can allow myself a little optimism here, maybe the streamers are finally getting the memo. I mean, yeah, Amazon is still cranking out action comedies that open with drone shots over cities, but they're also using MGM to put real movies in theaters, like Project Hail Mary. And Apple, okay, I don't really know if they've gotten the memo. They've got a bunch of Skydance-produced movies coming up, so, I'm not getting my hopes up there. And then there's the whole Skydance, Paramount, Warner Brothers situation. But look, I'm gonna put all that aside because I do not want to end this episode on a bummer note. So what I'm getting at is, maybe we've mostly turned the corner. Maybe the ever-increasing mountain of mid to low-tier movies has finally gotten too embarrassingly large for them to ignore. Maybe we finally crested the peak of Slop Mountain, and things are looking a little brighter on the other side. All right, one sec. Oh well. Hello, from the set of our next episode. If you are a regular viewer of the show, you know that for the past year, I have been promising a video about Hook, Steven Spielberg's 1991 Peter Pan legacy sequel. Well, it's Spielberg season. Disclosure Day opens in theaters this week, so I figured, hey, it's finally time. Hook is a movie that is very important to my generation. It is one of the definitive millennial films, but it's always kind of driven me nuts. It's a movie that is so full of ideas that are like at war with each other. It is so deeply personal to Spielberg. It is so much weirder than anyone talks about. So this episode is my definitive attempt to finally figure out what the hell is going on in this movie. And right now, when you're watching this, the episode is already finished. It is out now, and you can go watch it on Nebula. As you may have heard, Nebula is the indie streaming service owned by creators such as myself, where I release all of my videos a month before they go on YouTube. Nebula has hundreds of the best creators on the internet where you can watch all of their videos with no ads. But the exclusive stuff is what's really exciting. Like, Nebula is the exclusive home to almost all of Lindsay Ellis's new videos for the past few years, including her latest one about the legacy of South Park. You can watch the great comedy debate show Abolish Everything, a show I really, really love, where I'm actually a guest on season 2, or my recent short film, The Dinner Plan. And if you sign up with my link, which is in the description, you can click on it there, or also it's like right here if you want to type it into a browser, or here you can scan this QR code in case you're watching this on a TV, and then you can get a whole year of Nebula for 50% off, which comes out to just $250 per month. Or if you are really committed, you can get $200 off of a lifetime subscription, and then you never pay again. And if you use my link, it directly supports this channel, which, personally, I really appreciate. So come on, the Hook episode. It's out now. We've worked hard on it. Go watch it.